Welcome to
You Matter.
In Business.
Your hosts today are Ariel and Miriam. Your brand, your story, and your success.
Because you matter in your business. Welcome back to You Matter in Business. And Miriam is here with me. Hi, Miriam.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. So our host, Miriam and Ariel, we are going to discuss brand persona. So what is it and why is it important?
And I think, why is it different from what we discussed last week, which we talked a lot last week about ideal client. So, Ariel, how does our brand persona, how does that differ from our ideal client?
Well, that is a good question. So
Okay.
let's talk about what it is first. So what is a brand persona?
Okay, so what I think a brand persona is, I think a brand persona is the values that your brand wants the client to understand that that brand represents. So whether that be honesty, integrity, confidence, credibility, those kind of things, they're all values that your client uses as a decision as to whether they're going to buy from you. And the persona part of it is that actually you kind of make it very personable to that person. They can almost see your brand as a person.
Okay,
What
now
do you think?
there is a difference between a personal brand and whether a business would want a personal brand versus a business brand. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what is like a corporate brand? Like, Coke has a brand and Nike has a brand, and those are corporates, right? The big corporations that have
Yeah.
a brand that you see a symbol and you have a recognition and you have a jingle in your head. And so there's all these things that they've marketed and taught us through their marketing.
Yeah.
You know,
And the Nike swoosh or what tick or whatever you want to call it, instantly that you see that gives you a feeling of what that brand represents and what you're going to get out of it if you buy into that brand. So is it the quality of the sports equipment, or is it the fact that it's on trend, or is it that it's specifically for athletics and that's what you're into? Or that all comes from just seeing that tick, that swoosh, doesn't it? But is that their brand persona?
that's their brand identity. So, but the persona must be thought about before you can get to the brand identity, before you can even begin to market that identity. Identity can be logo, it can be your face. So, in the difference between a corporate brand or even a small business brand
Uh-huh.
is it's more about a group of people working together than a single individual. A service-based person or a business that you are the service, or you are the product, so to speak, if you want to say that. You are the brand. You are the face. You are what will immediately let people think. So that's developing a personal brand is different than developing a corporate brand or a small business brand. Does that make sense?
It does. So you're a personal brand photographer.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about how you help people develop that brand persona when that brand is them.
When it's them, it's actually easier in some ways, because it's just the thought processes of one person and the desires of their personal goals in their business. So usually it's an easier tack because it's clearer. When you have somebody who has, which I also do work with, but like a doctor's office or a chiropractor's office or an esthetician office or something, and they want to create a feeling that all of the people inside their business need to share. Their brand is more of a brand, but they still they might have a personal brand inside of that brand. Does that make, because the actual doctor or the esthetician might have a personal brand, but yet her company shares her branding. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And lots of times when companies like that, they recruit based on the values that they have and their brand has, and they recruit people that share those values and can then talk about those values and show those values through their life, through the way that they come to work every day, the way that they hold themselves in meetings, the way that they treat customers, that kind of thing. So it comes back to values.
It does come back to values, and it comes back to whoever the boss is or the
Uh-huh.
group of bosses, if it's a CEO, with a board type situation. They make that call. They get to define that. What is important to them? Is it hardworking, or is it working smart, or is it honesty and trust, or is
Mm-hmm.
it there's so many different values. If you just look up the word value, you're going to get a list of hundreds of words, right? So if you only could pick 3 out of all of the values that exist, there's going to be a reason you're going to pick those 3. And there might be a very complex reason why those 3 are sticking out to you the most. It's when you're limited to values that it gets harder to choose.
Yeah. But to a certain extent, the product or service that you are selling will dictate the values that you're likely to pick. So a chiropractor might choose different ones from a brand photographer, maybe.
Possibly,
Do
or
you
they could
think?
choose the same ones.
So do you not think that when you're choosing your brand that or your brand values, that actually there's certain brand values that everybody would say if you picked out most people are going to say honesty, integrity, those kind of things. So when you're picking your brand values, do you steer away from the ones that, yeah, well, everyone has those?
I think that's a part of digging, and that's a part of taking the time to really identify what this is. This is why we're talking about it, because all of these components, the client avatar, your brand persona, your vision statement, your mission statement, depending on when you were raised, all of those things that a company will define and grow and maybe even analyze and shift. It might be what you're thinking for this year, but then there's a shift in your life that shifts the whole thing for next year,
Mm-hmm.
or you're clear next year on who your ideal client is. So all of those things should be analyzed on a regular basis, but they also need to be really thought about at the very beginning of a base of a business.
Mm-hmm.
Just because when you are spending your money, you want that money to be used wisely. You don't want to be just, throwing a dart at an unknown target, right? So
So
you're
very much it goes back again to what we were talking about last week, as in who our ideal client is, because whatever values we are showing needs to match the ones that our client uh, want wants to buy from, wants to what
I
what
I
resonates
kind
with
of
them.
I feel like it's the opposite. And this is just me, so you can correct me. I have no problem being wrong. But for me, but again, I'm a personal brand. Personally, my business is a personal brand. So it might be different for corporate, but for me, I want to attract people who share my values. So my values are a part of the reason why I will attract you. And if you're not impressed by my values or the things that are important to me, then I won't attract you. And that's perfectly fine for me. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's more of it starts in and then goes out, because my ideal client, we share the same values because those values
Mm-hmm.
are so intrinsic to my work. It's a very big part of my job is those values. If I'm not compassionate and understanding and I don't take the time to listen to my client, I'm not giving them what they need. And then I fail
Mm-hmm.
because that's my value. I want to make sure I'm taking care of them. So that's my inner value. It's my company value, which then transcends to my client is a person who's looking for somebody who has that quality because that's what they have. Because they give that much to the universe. So they really need it back.
So the best client relationship would be someone that where your values totally align.
I think the more aligned you are, the more you just speak the same language. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you and I, we met And we just immediately was like, we've known each other forever because we do align in a lot of ways, not in every way, but
No.
it doesn't matter. But we're both at a point in life where I don't need a copy of me, right? To see the value in someone else. But that's where I'm at in life. There are people who need that mirror because they
Yeah.
haven't gotten okay with themselves, right? But when you're selling a product or a service, you're attracting people with and the values you pick. Will people ever read it? Probably not, but your messaging will have it in it,
And
right?
that's where it's key that that's your role is really key because you're helping people show through photographs what their brand persona is, what their values are, what people are buying when they get them. And that's all through the lens. It's what you're producing. And that's really hard, isn't it?
It is if you're not looking for it. There's multiple ways of achieving it from a visual standpoint, and it can be simple things like adding a prop to the situation. Props tell a lot. A prop adds a lot to a story without having to say a whole lot. It can
Like
say,
what? Give me an
um,
example.
like an example is you and me on the cover of this podcast. I'm holding a coffee cup. You're holding a teacup. What
Of
does that
course,
say
I'm
about
British.
us? Because you're British, right? You like tea and I like coffee, but yet we're together, working together. So what does that say about our values?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean that our values are opposite from each other, even though our choice of beverage is different, or that our culture is different, or that we come from a different experience in life.
But we both
Interesting.
respect one thing, and what is it? It's in that message. And if
Go on.
people don't think about this stuff for the most part, right? They just look and they react and then they move on. But there's a message in there that talks about the fact that we both as women respect something. And what is it? I'm putting her on the spot.
We really are. We as women respect one thing. What is it? Well, I don't know. Honesty? I don't know. What do you think it is?
Authenticity,
Oh,
which is a
you
whole
see,
nother
I think
subject.
we could do a whole podcast on
Yeah.
just
In fact, I
authenticity.
think we should on the next episode.
Okay, I'm good with that because that's a really important trait to have in business. So yeah, I think we could do an entire podcast on that. In fact, I could get quite excited about doing an entire podcast on authenticity. Okay, good. So when we're looking at our brand persona, and we're looking at the values that we want to give, how do we actually do that? What's the kind of mechanism? Why is it important? And is there a specific way that you go about it?
Um, yeah, persona or personality can be used interchangeably, but so some of the things that you're going to think about in building that persona or personality are going to be your color choices. It could even be font choices. It could be if I'm working with an older clientele, I wouldn't want to use a lot of fonts that are hard to read, right?
Oh,
I
good
I
point.
might
Okay.
choose a different platform to market on because there's
Mhm.
different demographics on different social media platforms. So if I know
Mhm.
that, I'm going to put my energy into the ones where my audience is. That's again, but that's all of these things are very interconnected. But
Yeah.
your logo, your color schemes, those things are part of the persona.
So how do you stop that persona being all about you? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Because your logo has to talk to your ideal customer. Your your messaging has to talk to your ideal customer. So how do you not just pick your favorite colors?
There's a whole psychology to color. So part of it is again, going back to your core values. Your colors should match your core values. They should have there should be some congruency across all this stuff. So
Yeah.
if I picked blue, there's a reason I picked blue because blue it's a very corporate color, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
color that most people use for a sign of trust. Trust is
Mm-hmm.
super important to me. So blue, I am appealing to people who trust is important to. It's
Okay.
important to me, and it's also important to my clients because they have to feel like they can trust me because I am doing something that is very scary for them, right? So that's just something that through my color, I have chosen. I was told by several professionals to use black and white and gray and all the boring colors that photographers use because
You couldn't just use boring.
your photography is your work. So you don't need to add anything to it, which is true if you're doing nature photography or street photography or architecture photography. That might be true in those cases. But when you're talking about personalities and people and hearts and motivations and the colors that we choose should be colors that are sending the message. So you do have to kind of, when you do colors, you got to think about why you're picking certain colors. And if you do research, this is fascinating. Why do some companies use orange? Why do some companies use red and white? Think about red and white. What do you think of?
Red for me, tends to be success and always winning.
What company do you
But
think of?
angry though. But well, I think there's a lot of sports teams that have the color red because it's kind of that's the way they're unlikely to choose gray, I would think.
Like if you say
But
orange,
red is anger. Well, red is anger, I think, for me.
or passion.
Orange, okay, passion maybe. Maybe that's the sports thing. Maybe it's passion. Orange is to me is pumpkins and autumn. But what does it say in terms of values? Yeah, you see, I would never use orange. It's not a color I like, so I would never use it. So tell me, what value does orange say?
Um, I cannot tell a lie. I do not know exactly because I know it's not a color I would pick either. But
It must be fire and
there's, whole websites on color. There's books on color psychology. Is that what it's called?
yeah. But you can also choose your clothes by the way that it fit colors, like bring out your eyes or anyway, that's getting off the point. So
Orange is
everything
vibrant and energetic,
okay.
enthusiasm, creativity, and warmth. See,
Okay.
playful. My other color
See,
is pink. And why'd I pick pink?
because
Pink is
it's
not
all
necessarily a color that I like love, but why did I pick pink?
because it's a color that you associate with femininity
And who is
and
my
you're
audience?
appealing to women. Yeah. You see, I've gone
I'm also
for
appealing
light.
to fun women,
Oh,
and it's a
well, I
fun
hope that's
color.
why we get on then. So I chose muted colors of blues and grays, and because I think that says trust and calmness and peacefulness, and I eat a
Tranquility.
lot and tranquility, and I talk a lot to my clients about breathing and taking a step back and analyzing and reflection. So my logo is stones stacked on top of each other because my work is kind of like building blocks of kind of building on a firm foundation and how you then and I'm sure most people don't read this into my logo at all, but that's how I saw it. But I've recently introduced pink into my logo as well because I want to talk to women as well. And I also wanted to not just have those grayish colors because I think that can also be depressive, maybe.
Yeah.
So I've got the pink in there, which contrasts with that, which shows joy and vibrance and that kind of thing. And I think also stones I think shows a little bit of control. And a lot of women that I talk to want to put control back in their life. So to me, that the logo tells a story to my ideal customer. And that
I
gets us on to the question of stories.
before you go, I have to tell you one thing that is very cool, and you probably don't even know it. But there is a psychological thing that happened with your logo, and I have to remember the name of the dumb thing. But in England, they used them. In New England, they're very popular, and it was a stack of stones. And unfortunately, they've been overused in nature. Kids will do this all the time. They'll build them, which actually harms nature to the extent that they're doing it. But it's either what's it called?
Are you Googling while we're talking?
I am Googling what, but it was used as a cornerstone or a guidepost
Yeah.
in paths. So when you would see a stack of stones, you knew that was a left or a right, and you
A
knew
waypoint.
there a waypoint. And it was
Good
so it was a
point.
guide point, which I thought was
Guide point.
great for you as a coach because
I
you
love
are
that.
guiding. But now not everybody knows that. So that may be part of your story that you need to tell is it's
I
building
do.
and guiding. See? That's
I
that's
love
a
it.
whole nother
You
conversation.
just, you've just changed my entire outlook on my own logo. I love it. Thank you. Appreciate that. So talk to me about story, brand story. I think actually we could do an entire
Oh,
podcast on just brand
absolutely.
story. So
And I
maybe
think
we
there's a
don't
lot
need to
of
go in.
confusion about brand story.
Okay.
And I think there's two different schools of thought about brand story. And I think there's
Okay.
probably good in both. So we'll save that for that episode. But there's, I mean, again, it's identifying who your client is,
Hmm.
identifying what messages you're trying to send. What is the company or your individual, depending on what kind of business you are, what is your values? What are your ethics? What are your major driving points, your motivations?
Your
Some people, and we
morals.
talked about this earlier, if you're a company that's reaching out to me saying, have you sold are you making over, 100,000 K, blah, blah, blah. If your message is all about money, I'm not interested in you.
Mhm.
I mean, money is a thing we have to deal with. Money is obviously the objective because we need to pay our bills. But if that's your primary motive, that's not a message that appeals to me. It repels me. Now, there are people that's all they want to know. They want to know how to make that, and that's their motive, which is fine. They're allowed to have that motive, and they will attract that audience. So
Yeah.
that's why it's important that our messaging needs to match our audience. And we've got to identify what those things are on the inside. That's where the persona comes into.
Yeah.
And it's all of those components, all the visual elements, the in your marketing, your logo, all that stuff put together. Like you didn't even, your logo has more meaning than you even knew, right? So we want something that has meaning, obviously, to us, but it also needs to have meaning to other people. A lot of
Yeah.
people will use a compass. Why?
Because it shows you the direction. It shows guides the
Exactly.
way.
And it's, what is true north, right? What path do I want? We need help in life. So that's often used in a coaching business. Obviously, it was too boring for you.
Obviously. Plus,
Obviously.
I drew my stones myself, and I can't draw a
Oh.
compass.
Oh, so it's a
Funny.
beautifully self-curated logo. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. See, we can be creative.
A lot of my friends know. I'm thinking of one particular person right now knows that I love to doodle, and I'll be sitting in important meetings, and I can cover an entire piece of paper with doodles. And she actually she used to take minutes in meetings that I was in, and she would collect my agenda back off me at the end of the meeting because it would be covered in doodles of, and she would keep them. So she's got a whole stack of my agendas covered with my innermost thoughts whilst we were having meetings.
My doodles. We could have a whole topic on doodles.
So,
Sounds like it. How to doodle through a boring meeting.
oh no, they were never boring, Ariel. I
Oh,
wouldn't like to say.
I would. I think men invented business meetings so that they didn't have to work. That's my theory. And there's a lot of women who will agree with me on that. That was very
My
sexist.
husband,
I apologize.
my husband has stand-up meetings to make sure they don't last too long.
Stand-up meetings?
Stand-up
Oh, that's
meetings.
wise. See, your
Yeah, yeah.
husband is smart.
He is.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a good man.
All right. So we're going to come back again and we're going to talk about, since we just decided, we're going to talk about authenticity and what is it? What are some of the mistakes that people make with authenticity in their marketing,
Mhm.
especially on social media, and why we think that's a mistake? And where is the balance? So that's a whole lot of stuff, but we're going to come back again in another episode and talk about authenticity and why it is important in business. So see you again.
See you later. Bye. See you next episode. After all, it is your brand, your story, and your success, because Ariel and I know you matter in your business.
Thank you for listening to the You Matter in Business podcast. Please follow, share, like, and comment. We would love to hear from you. This podcast is sponsored by Ariel Faith Photography and Enrich Life Coaching. The show notes provide more information on how to contact Ariel and Miriam and any guest speakers who share in our journey together.